Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first session of From Music and Cosmicity to Sound and Interiority. My name is Jonathan. I'll be your moderator for our 4 sessions here together. Let me go ahead and read a description for the class, and then I will share a bit of a biography for our professor today. On the 25th of February, 2019, Tom Goskar published the first article of a series asking this question: what is curating sound? The article tackled the practices and difficulties of curating sound today, addressing the scarcity of research on that specific topic, and scarce it is. The Sound Art Curating Conference took place in 2014. A book was published online on sound curating by the Leonardo Electronic Almanac in 2018, Curating Sound. And in 2021, the Saas-Fee Institute of Art held a series of conferences on the topic of curating noise, reverberations, and the polyvocal. The scarcity of the literature on the topic should be approached as a symptom, not of the absence of a problem, but of the difficulty questioning sound curation as a practice for the following reasons. First, sound and music are often the sides of a main visual course of secondary importance. Second, the claimed connection between curating and knowledge confronts sound curation to a totally different scholarship than that of the history of visual and performance arts, that is, musicology and ethnomusicology. Third, music and noise are performed during gigs, where people and their bodies are moved in a very different way than the stillness and discipline of spectators' bodies during exhibitions. Curiously, one may reckon that managing to integrate music and sonic creation in exhibitions also happened through the abandonment of the notion of music, recuperating the critical interrogation of the concept since the beginning of the 20th century. We'll investigate the movements of music and sound theories. Some movements are parallel to others, but the main movement transforms music from being an adequate means of describing the laws of the natural world, God's creation, through various occult correspondence theory, to being an adequate means of describing 1, the social world, and 2, the future. This corresponds to the sonic episteme. Of 3, tuning to the world from another level of experience. This corresponds to the aesthetic and socio-anthropological theories of music. These 3 elements are parallel to technical transformations of our equipment for accessing music and sound, recording music and sound, and broadcasting music and sound. As sound and technology met and merged, it challenged the site and object dependence of curation and exhibitions that music and sound art carry. This investigation will help us get a clearer grasp of the challenges music curation as a pedagogical and artistic act faces, which supposes either that one manages to craft a historical and musical objects, if they have to fit this description to be curatable, that is amenable to curating acts and activities, and question the relevance of the concepts in which it is embedded. Immersion, interiority, to name a few. Jim Schrub is a PhD student in philosophy and aesthetics at the Université Paris-Nanterre. He currently works on Simondon's impact on contemporary media theory. Previously, he has worked on Marx and Simondon's theory of technology and wrote a Simondonian critique of survivalism. And that's it for me. Jim, over to you.
Thank you, Zenobio. Hello, everyone. It's very nice to meet you. I'm going to, I guess, start right away, so I will have to share my screen. And we'll go. Okay. So you're supposed to see the presentation now. I just want to check with you, Zenobio, if when I start the presentation, you actually see like this. And if I switch to presenter mode, what do you see? Do you still see the actual presentation, or do you see my presenter mode?
Right now, you're just full screen. We're just seeing the image.
Okay, awesome, great, thank you. Okay, so I will start. First, thank you again for the introduction, just to give you a bit of a grasp of how I'm going to proceed from session 1 to session 4, I guess. We're not going to be like chronological, because I'm going to start with an overview of contemporary issues. And in the next session, I'm going to go back to like medieval times in history. But today we're going to really focus on like contemporary issues and curating pretty much. I also have like kind of a pedagogical bet, which is that I'm going to start with like the same, I guess, naivety that Tom Goskar had when he wrote his article on how we don't really have a lot of literature on curating sound. So I'm really going to try and start from there. And I also wanted to say that in the meantime, there has been in the past few years kind of a renewal and a production of literature on curating sound and curating in general. So books from like 2018 or 2021, I guess. So we still have, well, we are being provided in the recent years with a rather prolific material on the issues that I'm going to be tackling today with you. So I entitled my my course From Music and Cosmicity to Sound and Interiority, an inquiry into correspondences, and correspondence is really going to be my main focus for this class, because I don't want to spoil anything, but my point would be to kind of study this concept of correspondence as like a crucial concept that has been transformed and carried with him like changes in how can I put that, from a paradigm of expression to a paradigm of efficacy and impact. So from like an expressive paradigm to a causal one. That's going to be for later sessions, but I guess it may provide you with some guidance or idea about where we are heading towards. Just another administrative thing about your gradings. So I guess you know that, but in case, just a reminder. So your gradings, according to the New Center for Research and Practice guidebook, is about 20% for seminar attendance, 30% for text presentations, 10% for in-class participation, and 40% for the final work, which is like an essay or a video or anything. Okay. So this is like, now we're getting into the material. So just for the record, since my background and information are in philosophy, I will first like insist on the fact that I am not a musicologist nor a historian of music. So my focus during these sessions will really be about like the different ways in which philosophers or musicologists have wired music to like a set of different concepts, operations, and objects. And I want to focus on this for various reasons, but I'm just going to stick to like my main hypothesis for this seminar, which is like that there is a continuity between older musical cosmologies and contemporary pretensions of sound art in particular. And so the idea of this seminar is to take you through the exploration and challenge of that hypothesis in order to extract along the way operative concepts that may help us face contemporary challenges of curation on the one hand, and on the other hand to like get a clearer view of how we did switch from music to sound in the field of contemporary art, especially since music already have its own channels of broadcasting, production, broadcasting and consumption. One of the difficulties I had is, and I'm going to take like an expression of Seth Kim Cohen in the beginning of In the Blink of an Ear, is that such clarity of knowing the field of sound art, such clarity seems inconceivable amid today's polyphony of blogs and wikis. So this is kind of a general statement, but what I make of this is that in the field of sound art, you kind of have to start with the decision of what's going to be relevant. How are you going to decide on the lines that you want to follow through for your thinking, and how you're going to also build yourself a corpus or a set of examples, artworks that you will have to analyze and get to know a bit better. So I can't really aim at exhaustivity, of course, and I don't pretend either to be able to hierarchize and canonize anything in some way, or like value over others some conceptions of sound art over others, because like the modern world is kind of over. So the decision, though, is to work with the concept of correspondence, account for its shifts, and try to explore how this has informed our cultural sound artistic milieu today. In order to do that, I have like sketched up a set of questions, which we're gonna run through as of now. So my first question was about sound art and curation, and it was, so this is the syllabus, by the way, but like I have associated question to them. So the first question is, what did we have to do to music so that it could get into exhibitions or gallery spaces? The second question, which will be about our second session, which is music of the sphere, Humana, Mundi, Instrumentalis, Celesta, medieval music theory and the concept of correspondence. We'll try to answer to the question, what was required for the transformation to happen and keep happening? Our third session, from emanation and expression to emergence and reconfiguration, will try to provide answer to the question, what did we have to do to music theory so that it went from a macroscopic expression to being directed towards microscopic effects? And the last session will be about creating sonic objects, and we'll try to tackle the heterogeneous material practices of time-based art faced with the stable material institutions of, for instance, gallery spaces. And this will try to provide answer to the question, what kind of objects are sound artworks, and how does this putative object transform now? Sorry. And to tackle all of these questions, I will first suggest kind of an overview of curation's concepts and alternative approaches so that we can see where music and sound stand on the debates and what curation can be today. I'll use a few references, but I will want to start because I have two options. If I'm going to talk about music and curation, thematically, I can start either by presenting theory of music or by presenting theories of curation. So I'm actually going to start with curation. And we're going to do that through the text quote from an interview of Barbara London, which is a sound and video art curator that has done one of the first exhibitions of sound art that we actually got to see. And so in the interview from the Art Pulse magazine, she stated and took position about the interactions, social interactions, and maybe conceptual interactions of people that make music and people that make sound art. So I will start like pretty much by interrogating this disconnect that we start with. Okay, so if I contextualize again, what did we have to do to music so that it could get into exhibitions and gallery spaces? First of all, the thing is that something had to happen. And what I want to do is try to investigate the idea that it would also be like something had to happen. Maybe this is about the distribution of people into institutions and into sort of different practices. So it's about the material and socio-material aspect of the problem. Because material conditions and sound art curation are kind of organized socially. So there must have been a movement that's both a movement of human beings and individuals and a movement of knowledge, concept, and senses that have been organized differently. And so I guess I believe that Barbara London has kind of identified this this kind of movement that I'm trying to get a grasp on. So the interviewer says, for many, the categories of sound and music are inexorably linked, collapsing distinct conceptualizations of these terms. But rather than emphasizing this link, you list music as one of the many disciplinary angles with which sound can be associated. Can you explain how you see this relationship? And Barbara London answers, sound is ineffably intertwined with music. The majority of the artists with work featured in Soundings, which was her exhibition, are practicing musicians. They may have come out of art or music school. Perhaps they have played an instrument in a band or used synthesizers, but all move fluidly between mediums and disciplines. This is natural. Institutions categorize and establish definitions, which are useful handles generally for the short term, but we also rewrite or upgrade definitions regularly. And so I want to start with this answer because it's kind of a simple one, but it's very interesting because she straight up rejects any initial potential initial dichotomy between strictly continuist and strictly discontinuist position about like the separation of music and sound art. So she affirms that there's kind of a sociological continuity while avoiding to address the question of the conceptual continuity or discontinuity. So she, well, come on. Because she addressed only one side of the issue where the second one was kind of addressed in the text by the interviewer, where we can make a few like conclusions about this. The first is that the taxonomic issue, as I said, is just kind of discarded. The second point that I'm interested in is the idea that discipline produces the art or the practice, like the disciplinary angle that the interviewer talked about and that Barbara London then insists a bit on. And this kind of remind me of Schaeffer's definition of soundscape as any acoustic field of study, with this lingering idea or underlying idea that I guess the discipline and the academic field of research is kind of producing the artistic practice and the aesthetic approach of any type of object. And she, that's kind of the last point. She presents institutions as this sort of modulatory device that stabilize and pace the various transformations of this artistic landscape. So she drops the categorical taxonomic thinking, but she still kind of explains its existence by the institutional activity, even though this institutional activity kind of keeps also moving with the evolution of the artistic practices themselves. So it's not kind of a control theory, biopolitical idea of institutions as normative spaces, because they are normative in that they stabilize things, but they are also evolutive. And sorry, this this take on institutions will also be something that like we will tackle in the next minutes of this session. Okay. So since we have singularized a social aspect and a conceptual aspect, I am going to take this opportunity to sort of explore the various possibilities that these two aspects convey. And I'm going to use that in order to present you with a few music theories, such as like Trevor Wishart, in order to sort of get into the material of sonic theory. So we have Barbara London that affirms a sociological continuity while avoiding to address the question of conceptual continuity or discontinuity for the benefit of a more fluid approach, as I just said. And I am presenting you with this strange table because I believe that what we are trying to do here is we're trying to locate the subject and its role within social institutions, distributing people here and there, and the manufacture of concepts of field reflexivity. And we can identify at least 4 possibilities in order to understand pretty much how did it come that sound and music have been disconnected, and how is this disconnection materially maintained? That's kind of the question that we are working on here. So my first possibility is social continuity and conceptual continuity, which is kind of what Wishart and Thom, which I mentioned later, kind of aimed for, but hasn't really been materialized yet. It implies a porosity between the two with difference that help maintain the distinction. Otherwise, we kind of would have to claim the synonymity. So this kind of require an approach of music and sound as artistic movements, just as like artists make work online or colors. So it's not really revolutionary. I'm not trying to revolutionize anything here, but it's more about conceiving of music and sound art as a growth and an expansion of artistic norms, artistic milieus, and artistic practices that allows for their pluralization. And such an idea kind of stemmed from the confrontation of a set of definitions of sound art as like a practice. For instance, Corbusier, Milberg, and Truax, I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm sorry, defined sounding art as a, I quote, human-made artistic and or aesthetic applications of sound, being, and music. Music, sound art, games jingles, and commercial multimedia events, and sound designing. So they are human expressions that use sound as material medium and all subject matter. And these sonic applications are always active, vibrant in the sense that they have the potential to affect listeners, even if the sounding artwork is about the absence of sounding out. Sorry. And it's also always like exceeding the aesthetic realm, because the diversity of the approaches and the practices are kind of made to address social, ethical, economic, religious, environmental issues, to mention only a few. So that's like a very broad definition, which can help understand the missing point between like social environments and conceptual environments of music and sound production, because here we have the idea of social practices being absolutely intertwined with, I guess, conceptual production and manufacturing of what is it that sound and music does in the light of the social practices that it comes to feed or contest or things like that. Another perspective would be kind of aside from any social, social awareness would be the definition of Trevor Wishart, who kind of claims that, well, in the beginning of his book on sound art, claims that this is kind of the same thing, but he maintains the distinction because he doesn't want to say irritate people who want to maintain the distinction. But the porosity, that's kind of what I want to get you. What I want to get you, the porosity of the social and the conceptual here are kind of, I mean, kind of paroxystically expressed when you kind of encounter the definition of Kannenberg, which I've put in the bibliography. And Kannenberg defines, it was a Facebook post actually. Kannenberg defines sound art as any form that critically explores the creation of cultural, political, scientific, and conceptual situations surrounding the act of listening. That was the definition that he posted in 2018. And what struck me when I came across it is that pretty much the sonic aspect has completely disappeared, and has been, well, replaced by sorry, has been replaced by a subject-oriented perspective that is really about trying to understand what is it that happens when you listen to something. So it's subject-oriented, and it's mostly psychologically oriented, which also means that pretty much the field of sound art, sound practices, and its investigation becomes transdisciplinary and not really sonic. I mean, a text on listening could absolutely fit into the practice and the definition. So, well, the plurality of definitions that we have here, even like this kind of first subcategory, helps us see that music left as a traditional Western signifier seems kind of incompatible with sonic art's variety of contemporary practices. And more importantly, as I said, Kannenberg's definition ends up so broad that the sonic sense related dimension of sound art kind of goes a bit away for the benefit of the focus on reception mostly, without like any position of media dependency for the benefit of a focus on like user-centric parameters. If I'm going into the detail of not the normative utopian position of Wishart, but if I'm more talking about what's happening in the acts, we have, I guess, social discontinuity and conceptual continuity. This means that, well, for Wishart, this means that maybe people who do sound art and people who do music don't really like are not really the same people, but they still do the same thing and they still manipulate the same concept. And this kind of has been also developed by Randy Thom, whose article I've put in the bibliography, and is it's also linked there. He's a sound designer for cinema and music. He's worked with Alan Silvestri, for instance, and he kind of accuses this disconnect between people who do sound and music, and people who do sound and people who actually do music. So here we kind of leaving the field of sound art for sound art, I guess, autonomous sound art, for perspective of someone who manipulates sound in an artistic context, which is film crafting, and sort of accuses the disconnect between his work and his counterparts, musicians' work, where sometimes they just don't communicate. And what's interesting in this article is that he really claims that they just don't share the same vocabulary. So they do the same thing. So conceptually, pretty much it's about the same things. But because of the social disconnect between musicians and the sound designers, they don't speak the same language, even though what they do is actually similar. So here we have kind of another perspective on this connection between the two, which is pretty much based on the material organization of how is it that we, I guess, produce, this is an awful word, but how do we produce musicians and composers, and how do we produce sound designers? It's kind of a problem about cultural policy, I guess, around sonic topics, which still don't pierce through to lay people and leave sound art like as a very in-group thing and art practice. So like this is again this element of social factor there. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm trying to see if I can like move on a little bit. Okay, so yeah, on a more critical level, it's like possible to claim on the basis of, again, Seth Kim Cohen's in the blink of an ear, sorry, that the absence of connection between like the world of concert halls and the world of sound art stems from pretty much the refusal from concert halls of this new and challenging production, as can be accounted for in his book, and like it's a consequence of okay, I'm just gonna like give you the quote, but pretty much the idea of there's someone who wrote something. Yep. I don't have like a lot of slides. You're welcome. Okay, so we were on like the social discontinuity, conceptual continuity part of the table, and we are still gonna move. We still have like two things to cover. I'm gonna be a bit quicker on these ones, but Seth King Cohen in his book mentions that pretty much concert halls and institutions kind of refuse the aggressive noise artistic productions, which also means that art galleries kind of had to greet sound artists because they were the only ones that actually accepted that this kind of practices and artistic practices happened in these spaces, because concert halls would refuse, for instance, if you are making extreme music, refuse to have you in their halls because they are scared for their speakers or like sonic infrastructure to collapse on the tremendous amount of noise that this may produce. So you have this element, and you have another element, which is also John Cage, who I guess you know who he is if you need any well, I guess like any idea of who he is. He's the one who made 433. So this silent piece. And he wrote a lot of things about trying to free art from, I guess, any kind of referentiality, intentionality, and really wanted to have a conception of sound as self-referential. And so he tried to integrate and get into the various musical institutions of his time. So that's concert halls, but that's also some radiophonic productions and everything. So I'm gonna read you through a little paragraph of Kim Cohen's book on Cage. So in 1948, the Muzak network supplied environmental music meant to increase productivity and reduce absenteeism to offices and factories across the United States. Clients included small companies as well as huge ones: Prudential Insurance, Bell Telephone, and McGraw-Hill Publishing. Cage's proposal to compose a piece of uninterrupted silence and sell it to Musacco is an uncharacteristic intervention into a commercial channel. Cage was fond of mixing sound sources from different cultural strata, sources with different uses and functions, but his approach, almost exclusively, was to bring the non-musical into the concert hall, to turn radios into members of the orchestra, to employ hardware store ephemera and office supplies and addenda in the mechanics of the grand piano to play wafted So that's really in the beginning of the book, like page 19 or something. So we have, again, this practice of cage. So on the one hand, too much noise, I refuse. I'm a concert hall. I refuse to have you in my hall. Second, cage doing his provocative art pieces that have been refused by institutions because they were incompatible with them. And so this may be like a set of factors that have kind of relegated sound artists and these innovative practices out of concert halls and have sort of fostered the singularization of one practice in a gallery space, for instance, or with like a specific space for sound art to be produced. I'm going to roll through the last one rather quickly. So social discontinuity and conceptual discontinuity kind of means that like nothing is porous and it's like whoop, different people with different practices. This I lost my note. This I guess I want to both explain and challenge that through an analogy with what's going on in literature. You have, for instance, my reference is McCaffrey. McCaffrey was poet and literary theorists that is reported in Cox's text on sound and metaphysics. And he kind of claimed that poetry has moved from thorough attention, paid to the sentence, the proposition, to attention paid to the word. And so we kind of are moving from the whole to the parts here, pretty much. And I was wondering if this kind of shift maybe was exactly what kind of happened with music and sound art. And this would leave us with the idea that the social discontinuity is pretty much tantamount with the discontinuity that happened in the literary field, like someone who would study, I guess, theater, and someone who would study novels, and someone who would study poetry when it was focused on the sentence, and someone who would study poetry when it's focused on syllables. So with a kind of homogeneous field of research and practice, which because of like specialization and investigation has become growingly heterogeneous because of like specialization. So again, not like a revolutionary hypothesis, but pretty much ideas that I'm throwing here to sort of have us question this kind of divide between music and sound art. And the last possible position would be that there is social continuity and conceptual discontinuity, with the idea that maybe, as for instance, Barbara London seems to have said, maybe people are educated with the same basic material concepts and basic, I don't know, softwares. And they end up being interested in different conceptual areas or different levels of interest. If pretty much, for instance, what I want to do as like a musician or a sound artist is to provide people with emotions, fun, ambience and everything, I might rather be interested in music rather than being interested in sound art, which is pretty much not about fun. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to establish as possibilities here. I'm going to wrap this slide up and then we're going to move to the next one. So to wrap it up, we've kind of established here that the social relation between music and sound is not socially nor conceptually as stable as you may believe at first glance, like strict separation between the two, one being more fundamental condition of possibility or of the other, as you may find in Cage, for instance, where you have like sonic and just above the music with structure. So what we make so far of these alternatives is that this area and this question of conceptual continuity or discontinuity and their putative articulation and separation are kind of an actual axis of conversation that can be structuring in one's approach of music and sound art. And in the end, also of curating, because, well, it also helps select adequate and desirable context for entering in a relationship with a given work. Yeah, so that was the point that I wanted to make. But this, I'm following up, but this naive question also had to be asked because continuity and discontinuity from music to sound infiltrates our present question, which is, again, what is it that had to happen to music so that it could get into galleries? And we can now add what had to happen despite the putative continuity between music and sound. And I have a few tracks for that. So I have the hypothesis of functionalization, the hypothesis of emotion, and the hypothesis of pedagogy. So I'm going to run through these hypotheses now. My first track then is functionalization, which has pretty much two sides. First, functionalization of music and sound in the gallery space, which consists in adding sonorous backgrounds to exhibitions, or on its contrary, investing in isolating material to have like kind of the pure white cube. This functionalization works as Gérard Genet's paratexts concept in his book Seuil. That's written Seuils. And so that's where sound works as this pretty much liminal space between the interior and the exterior. And the second form of functionalization consists in having music and sound introduced as dimensions of a work of art. So that's performance art, installation art, video art. So more generally, it concerns noise and sound design in digital art, sculptures, installations. And so this is really the realm of performance art, where in installations, for instance, sound is often conceived of as an operator of immersion. So one of the nodal concepts of coding the sonic aesthetic experience is immersion here. Maybe the problem we have with that is that the functionalization remains a very loose signifier that may not be super efficient in enabling us to grasp the logics at work in the sound art and artistic landscape, because it doesn't really help us understand the history and the heterogeneity of a field whose genesis is disparate because, as I said, it emerged in different aesthetic traditions like performance art, installation art, media art, or digital art. This wide set of artistic trends and traditions are also themselves in relation to one another and in relation to other competencies in artistic works such as film, video games, music, everything that is connected with sonic artistic practices. The putative consequence of this functionalization is to potentially devalue music as a means rather than an end, which of course suppose this initial hierarchy between means and ends, supposes also that we embrace an essence or accident dichotomy and hierarchy with like something that would be essential to the work, pretty much something that has to be seen, and something that would be accidental, such as the sonic accompaniment of the work. And it also presupposes an order of perception where the auditory is secondary, which kind of means that we will have to get into like a conversation about the sort of hierarchy of the senses that exists in the debates, which is often discarded, but is often also really working into these the various theories of both visual arts and sound art. Anyway, having music and sound used as like background forms of noises. Okay, so sound art and noise are operators of immersion. Like that's kind of the dominant paradigm. It has a corollary, which is the investigation of space, because you need space to be immersed in. And so this kind of is at the origin of, well, with Max Neuhaus, but this is kind of at the origin of this theory of immersion and of sound as mostly a spatial experience and not really a time-based art and material. This is, again, one of the dichotomy dividing sound art theories. Is it an art of space or is it an art of time? And this kind of paradigm of immersion, contemplation, interior experience still dominates, I guess, again, music and sound, and it also sort of feeds into subaltern like discourses as well as or Western dominant ones. I'm saying this because, for instance, in dealing with disaster, notes towards a decolonizing aesthetic relational sound art, Pedro Vieira advocates for the mindful, evokes, sorry, the work of Bunatia Chattopadhyay, who advocates for the mindful perception of the listener to sonic materiality and sound itself, moving, quote unquote, beyond the objecthood of sound and disconnecting sound from meaning so as to advocate a sort of contemplative, mindful perception, which also ends up advocating for modern neo-Kantian relations to art, which I'm still gonna like dive into uh, the analysis of it. Is just like you can have this objection of immersion is kind of also working towards the renewal of modernist perspective on sound art and everything with like neo-Kantian relations to art. But you can also save that if you resort to Hegarty, because you can say that like Chattopadhyay's avant-gardism may also be tantamount to social noise, which is like noise for the initial institutionalized sonic art practice. And as such, okay, moves toward this idea of art progresses and maybe invites to contemplation, but this invitation also helps like the art scene move forward. So this kind of modern coordinates and modern objection that you can make to a few sound artists and some sound works to an extent kind of don't really last long if you want to save that with Hegarty, that is. Anyway, so my point really was mostly that like this technological possibilities of recording sound, of broadcasting sound somewhere, anywhere, which have like carried with them a renewal of theories of presence, immersion, and everything, have been the ground of like, I guess, legitimation narratives over sound art, such that this would be a dimension that paintings pretty much lacked. And so if we are still trying to sort of singularize, this is really my problem. This is about structuring an artistic and academic field. How do you do that if like the material institutions of sound art, music and everything are sort of spread around in like producing heterogeneity that maybe shouldn't really exist, but maybe like has a purpose in terms of specialization and everything. Here we have this idea of maybe immersion is a specific concept that will help singularize the specificity, sorry, of sound art as like a an art form with, I guess, epistemological or ontological privilege over something that another art lacks. So this is why immersion is kind of one of my focus point here. So yeah, well, to conclude on this first track, that is functionalization. The functionalization seems to orient us towards theorizing music and sound in the light of the effects and impacts it has on bodies, flesh and brain. However, this also seems to entail a redefinition of what's interesting in bodies. Indeed, to recycle a formula of Laura Metz, to be found in her text on Orvonde, that's one of the artworks that I've sent you and put you in the bibliography. We ask ourselves, what is it that has been taken from the initial audio landscape and exported into artistic practices and gallery spaces? Since the focus on the body seems central in sound art and installations. And to answer that, my first answer would be that these spaces, gallery spaces, have shied away from essential components of the music scene. That is pretty much, to sum it up, emotion, for the benefit of other concepts such as the body and affects. So here I'm transitioning towards my second track, which is emotion. So first we have maybe sound art managed to get into gallery space through functionalization. So pretty much by the margins and not really forcing its way into gallery spaces. And now we are trying to identify another parameter, which is the way that sound art has kind of dropped emotion and emotional intention to the intention to emotionally impact people through the work. For the benefit of, I guess, affect, this kind of shift is pretty much philosophical and theoretic, because it's not about saying that you cease to feel when you're confronted to sound art. It's just that what you're supposed to feel, or like your affective vibe, is not oriented in the same directions. I have to talk to you about this and about the emotions, because this is a necessary step in the transition from the 19th to the 20th century in the advent of recording and broadcasting technologies, as well as with the futurists' work on sound and noise. And this, of course, well, will imply for me that I remind you of the genealogic connection of sound art with music, and with its separation in music, separation with romanticism. The emotional reading of music is coded, in our word, coded mostly in like romanticism, and the advent of romanticism with music supposed to elate the affective life and elate the subjective life and present you with tremendous hyperbolic emotions. So this feature of romanticism also connected music with what I will call with Osborne revelatory theories of art. So revelatory theories of art are a set of theory gathered under the common property of claiming that art functions as a means of for revelations to occur, be they an access to the noumenal world or an access to fundamental or transcendental, mystic, emotionally induced truths thanks to a work. So the idea is that art reveals something, again, being like fundamental truth about being in itself, or about the order of the world, or about the essence and universality of human passions and sensibility, or something about the structure of sensations, for instance. So this is really, I'm giving you all these as examples because the idea is that this is an umbrella term for theories that have nothing in common except that there is this kind of event that happens. And romanticism, well, still conveys like a few paradoxes. I don't know how familiar you are with romanticism as a musical movement, but it conveys a lot of paradoxes. But it's a more stable signifier than revelatory theories of art. And the paradoxes and polarization that Romanticism is subjected to, we are more aware of. So the idea is that it designates an artistic and philosophical attitude towards the world and towards music, according to which it remains the apprehension of a spiritual sensuality, through which the interior emotion triggered by good music refers down not to conscious apprehension, but to the obscure depths of being. So it kind of implies a nominal world revealed, as opposed to the phenomenal world, sorry, revealed in artistic expressions and explored to the depth of, in the exploration of human emotions and their enhancement through the arrival in our landscape of concert halls with Handel. So to sum it up, if music developed itself with like Romanticism, and at the beginning of at the transition from the 19th to the 20th century, starting with the recording technologies and electricity's development in the 19th century up to, I guess we'll set that 1933 with Luigi Russolo's Art of Noise. What happens is that we are completely dropping any kind of emotional pretension or an emotional goal that would be assigned immanently and essentially to music. And this leads to a scission, a separation from music that will still be in charge of conveying emotions, to sound art, which will be in charge of something else, which has then been pluralized in various types of ambitions. Luigi Russolo, for instance, didn't give up at all on the metaphysical pretension of music and of noise, while on the contrary, some sound art theories or like Deleuzian theories of music completely try to deprive music from any kind of metaphysical revelatory pretension. It still will have metaphysical pretensions, but they won't be revelatory. So there is a real attitude and pretension shift that's happening there. As for my third track, I say that if sound art like came into gallery spaces without music's emotional and expressionist stakes, it also entered gallery spaces as a feature of artistic experimentation, engaged in the study of perception as and sound, as physical. So that's the inquiry on sight, space, room in relation with sound, and sound as material wavelength and vibrations, and mathematical. So that's later information theory. And as such, with like a focus on these phenomenon, as such, this is like a shared feature with music. It bore consequences into the curating processes and the importance, of the pedagogical aspect of exhibitions and art critique as pedagogical art acts. And so that's my third track. So I have separated this pedagogical track because it helps me get back to curating issues after having like made a detour to music theory and some of the debates and dividing points that would separate like musicians from sound artists and music from sound. Okay, so that's my third hypothesis to explain what had to happen to music for it to get into gallery spaces. This third track is pedagogical because in many of the recent exhibitions about like music and sound, there has been a historicization of the musical object or genre. For example, like the exhibition, there will be an exhibition on the history of hip hop in Paris this summer at the Philharmonie de Paris. But there has been, like, it's not the first exhibition on hip hop. Vicky Toback did something at the MoPop, the Museum of Popular Art in the United States. And so this implies the manufacture of audible objects amenable to acts of knowledge and acts of transmission of this knowledge, which can happen through curation as well as through musical experimentation. So curation can here function as like something that helps convey knowledge. It can also function as a medium, a channel that helps get a message, get new combinations and new aesthetic ideas across in a history ready and study ready fashion. And this can be, for instance, seen and grasped in Geber Modus Operandi, a band that makes experimental music mixing Dutch 1990s tradition of Geber House and the Jatilan, which is a Javanese ritual dance that also functions as a trance dance where the sacred, the stupid, and the fun meet, as you can like see in the thumbnails of the links that I've sent you beforehand. I hope you have had the opportunity to listen to the tracks. So Geber Modus Operandi has been able to perform and has been surrounded and accompanied by analytic literature and exposition of their work and their complex relation to Indonesian traditions and Dutch musical movements. And this example, so I don't know, I think I'm just going to like ask the question. First question, are you okay? Second question, have you had the opportunity to listen to the music or not?
Jim, I'm sending links. Are you talking about the 3 links you put up on Google Classroom?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. Here's the last one.
Thank you very much. Like, did you receive them? Have you had the opportunity to listen to them? Okay. Okay, awesome. Second question, if like sometimes I'm being unclear or if I'm talking too fast, really feel free to interrupt me. This is pretty much pressure and stress, so yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's a good jam. I really like the tracks and the sound. Yeah. How am I gonna put this? Okay, so I am gonna put myself into the shoes of a curator, and I am a curator aiming at like transmitting these materials as pedagogy with a I'd say I'm trying to English that up in a pedagogically oriented manner. So I want to present this material so that in the end, the people that will visit my exhibition will end up getting knowledge from this. So what I'm trying to do there is create what we may call Bildungsroman, so create and critiquing cultural narrative. Yeah, absolutely. Boredom is the key. So a question that I may have to present an answer to would be, how do I put this in narration? How do I create a sense of what's going on? And to give you an example, I selected videos that I believe are at least melodically compatible and related, so that you can, from jumping from one video to another, have a sense of really the resemblance and sort of get able to see what has been taken and what has not been taken from one art form to another. But this may not be like an adequate entry point because I'm not really, for instance, proposing something else, which could be comparing the dance and the states that people enter when dancing Chatelain or dancing on Gabber House or dancing on Gabber modus operandi, which I don't know, maybe this will produce new ways of moving oneself and new ways of dancing. So this is first another question I could like another perspective, another entry point that I could select. I could also have to make a decision on how important the material analysis of like the instruments, the composing processes, the historical factors will have to like be presented to my audience if I want them to understand this musical practice. Um, so yeah, like these are kind of the questions, and here I did like, I'm not going to say it's an act of curation. This is not not one, but I did a selection minimally on like melodic compatibility, hoping that it will help you see how indeed there is a continuity between Jatelen, Gabber House, and Gabber modus operandi. But if I could have chosen other parameters, and the question here is, if I'm transmitting knowledge, what is it that I'm transmitting exactly, and how do I select what I want to transmit? What kind of narrative do I subordinate it to, for instance? And these kind of challenges, I will start and try to, well, illuminate them with another example about this curatorial intent for knowledge communication from Hansen's 2018 book. So again, this is a book that is part of like the literature that is currently coming up about curating and sound curating. And this book is entitled Curatorial Challenges: Interdisciplinary Perspective on Contemporary Curating. And it's a general book on contemporary curating and every type of art, such as fashion, painting, installations, with an underrepresentation of sound. Like it's not really, it doesn't, it's never the object of a particular article. I have, if I want to find something on sound and music in this book, I really have to read everything and try to see when someone is going to like tackle the idea of there is sonic things that are happening there and that are being curated for as well. So just this parenthesis to say that we are, because it's we are going to dive into prolific literature on like what is music, what is sound, how do we curate them, and this richness hasn't really been put out there in a book about sound curating as of yet. Well, we have I guess 2 books that have been coming up, but it's just 2 books, so it's still a bit scarce quantitatively. Anyway, one article does mention sound, but it solely mentions it as like part of the grandiose elements of the exhibition in question without providing any thorough analysis of it. And so this falls into the category of relegation of sound into secondarity that I mentioned earlier. And in any case, it did show that sound art and curation still entertain complex relations, so much that even in an interdisciplinary book on curating featuring texts from curators, scholars, sound artists, it remains pretty much underrepresented. And fortunately, as I just briefly mentioned, we have Groth and Schultz's recent book that is pioneer in the domain of collective effort at presenting text about sound curation, whose only precedent was a book written by Caleb Kelly, Sound Gallery, in 2011. So that will, of course, be focal points of our forthcoming discussions. But so far, I'm getting back to the book by Hansen and Curatorial Challenges, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about this work that evokes briefly sound. So the article tackling sonic elements of this exhibition is Contested Paradise, exhibiting images from the former Danish West Indies, which is about an exhibition called Blind Spots, Images of the Danish West Indies Colony, which was held during May 19th, 2017 to February the 3rd, 2018. And it's an exhibition whose curatorial stakes was the opening of a critical space regarding Danish colonial past. So Denmark owned the Virgin Islands, which are 3 islands: St. Thomas, St. John's, and St. Croix, from 1666, yes, to 1917. And then they were bought by the USA. So they want to open this critical space through colonial images mostly. And so the article has been written by a co-curator of the exhibition, Sarah Gersing, Matthias Dunbolt, and Metakia Krabemeyer. We're going to get a bit into the detail of that. Yes. Okay, so in their text, their perspective is that they have, as curators, tried to put to existence in the exhibition through the systematic social contextualization of images, which had been so far really absent from any exhibition, tackling Danish colonial history. So they really try to provide this narrative on coloniality that is and has been absent in exhibition galleries and rooms in Denmark just before them. And sound in this exhibition was included through the lens of providing a contemporary artistic insight into our current relationship with slave trade and Denmark's colonial past through 2 films. One is a film showing a recorded conversation. It's called What Lies Unspoken by Temi Odumosu. The conversation is introduced as providing soundscapes. You'll see that. And so that happens. This is a conversation between an artist and a historian about a video game about slave trade, which is supposed to make us understand slave trade better. And the second work is the video of Whip It Good, whereby the artist, Ellis, whips, so this is video art, whips charcoal on a white canvas. And about this, Krabmeyer writes, that's on your slide if you want to follow along. The soundscapes provided by What Lies Unspoken offered a conversation bringing together different opinions and backgrounds. Our intentions went beyond the mere presentation of multivocal expressions. Exhibitions have the unique possibility of affecting the visitor physically or spatially and intellectually. An essential point we wanted to convey is that experience is always aesthetical, personal, and bodily at the same time. Hopefully, we opened a critical space, a space in which not only photographs, but also other images could be used again, in Elizabeth Edwards' words, as a tool to reveal the epistemological base of museum discourse, rather than merely make authoritative statements. A space where others will take up new research and provide new insights and openings in this emerging field of Danish colonial visual culture. And so I want to make a few remarks about this text. First, the curator approaches the sound of the video as soundscape. That is, again, if we take on the definition of R. Murray Schafer, sound, any acoustic field of study, where, by the way, the author also stated that soundscape is an event heard, not an object to see. So this eventmentality is very important here, and in the perspective of the curators who wanted to open a critical space and a conversation. This indeed can be understood under the frame of eventuality. So, well, was that's what I have to like precise. So, presented as a soundscape, which is a field of acoustic study, and which is thank you. So, which is a I lost it. Just a sec. I'm gonna try to find my sentence back again. Okay. Curators present. I'm gonna make it. Curators present their work as a as a soundscape. A soundscape is a field of study, but it's also not something to see, but an event to be heard. And such an event, if presented as such, kind of really diminishes or discards the video dimension of the work what lies unspoken for the benefit of the sonic discursive event of hearing, which well, hearing in a Danish space, the meeting between artists and scholars, including persons of color, talk about the negative and of the white negative impacts of the whitewashed colonial image, um, even an event, sorry, which impacts both the curatorial space as a source of events and the potential audience of the work. So that's like my first remark here. The second is that the curators justify their framing of the conversation as something that may affect physically, spatially, and intellectually on the grounds of being aesthetical, personal, and bodily in a correspondences set that is worthy of our careful analysis. So I'll make here the hypothesis that the structure is chiasmatic. So that would give us physically, bodily, spatially, personally, and intellectually, aesthetically. That is, in the end, a connection with the aesthetic experience and the curatorial pedagogical act of transmitting knowledge and positing oneself on a materialistic strand along the lines of which persons and personalities are the fruits of material conditions. Because personality, personally here, is put in connection with spatiality, so with place and I guess if I want to stretch that a bit, from place we can move to milieu, that is material, social, economic, natural conditions of existence. While the aesthetics are put back on the intellectual aspect of it. The third thing, Meyer writes that, Meyer, sorry, writes that the soundscape and the plurivocality, because more than one people talked in What Lies Unspoken series, open up a critical space aimed not only towards coloniality as an economic system, but also museum and the museal institutions as they took part in the process of running stigmatization and racial stereotyping by not offering the critical distance and epistemological approach of the objects on display should actually offer. And this criticality, tackling imagery and retrospectively the previous ways of curating these type of objects and themes that are colonization. So there is here double event of criticality. First, I criticize, of course, like the massive dispositive of colonization, and I also criticize the curatorial tradition that existed before my own exhibition, if I'm Khameya, which is an exhibition that is pretty much blind to any not only awareness but any responsibility taken for the damage that colonization may have done to, well, has done to the people living on these islands, and which is not over because these islands have been bought anyway. So on that note, that's why they apply they apply on this text, and a bit later what they mentioned Elizabeth Edwards, because Elizabeth Edwards has talked about the existence of a photographic agenda of the artists, which we should be aware of and which should be part of any curatorial pedagogical intention, because this photographic agenda is the photographic agenda of the people living there at the time, and is, of course, just as our own photographic agenda would be, full of biases, hierarchies, prejudices, and intentions that should be sort of undug in an exposition pretending to convey any form of knowledge on a situation through the mediums of photography or sound art or anything. So this has been developed, to give you the full reference, by Elizabeth Edwards in her essay Rethinking Photography in the Ethnographic Museum, where she states that museums of ethnography and indeed social and cultural history have used functional realist images as a window on the world without problematizing either photographic agendas themselves, the way in which photography operates as an institutional practice within museum, or the nature of photography itself. So that's kind of the dead angle that this exhibition has been able to accuse and has been able to shed light on. So if sound art is supposed to have this kind of pedagogical issue, of course it conditions the practices that will be fit for being exhibited. It will condition the practices of sound artists if they have to sort of produce and bring with them in their work a kind of knowledge that can be later transmitted. And it also puts the stress and the focus on two things. First, the idea that exhibiting and curating for music and sound mostly implies the construction of historical objects. For instance, that's the case with hip hop in Paris, or in Vicky Tobag's exhibition, which, by the way, was mostly about images and not really about sound and music, like the Spotify playlist of the sound on and of the hip hop tracks was produced years after the initial exhibition. And second, it emphasizes the connection between the field of sound art and sound studies and the field of ethnomusicology, which, of course, as ethnomusicology, puts really the stress on archiving, recording, and not on like the other side of the spectrum of sound artists, which is the ephemerality of sound art. It's eventuality, yes, eventuality. It's supposed to go away, and it's supposed maybe to structure practice, but at one singular point of iteration and not through repetition, stock, disposition, and distribution. So this position, because this position on curation, of course, structures the artistic practices, which is why I'm gonna try maybe to pluralize and open our possibilities for conceiving of curation, in case this perspective is informative but reductive. That could be a possibility. Because what we get from this is that curation can be associated, at least partly, with a successful act of production and transmission of knowledge, which still has to be problematized as such. And here I quote, "To capture these growing expectations of the museum's role in transforming mentalities, social attitudes, and behaviors, museum researcher Elise Dubuc has proposed an expansion of the 4 traditional functions of collection conservation, research, exhibition interpretation, and education to a set of 8 metafunctions: conservation, scientific, economic, political, educational, social, cultural, and symbolic." in the article, the last one about the 8 metafunctions, you can find this in an article that is linked. Well, the address is on the slide. I can send you the link if you like. It's an article by Ashiam and Solberg, and it takes these functions and it adds to them directions. It adds to them directions which can be either public or organizational. So with one function that is upward, subfunction that is upward, going upward, and one subfunction that's going downwards. And so the concepts, the 4 concepts of Elise Dubuc helps us maybe put a step back from this curating trend, tradition, discipline, the way that this way, at least, to be as general as possible, this way of curating, and helps us realize that maybe sound art can also be drawn back to curation as research, which is what would be fit for any kind of I guess art that would be more related to sound artists such as Luigi Russolo, such as John Cage, and the artists of the 60s and 70s, which really take the gallery space as a place where we still are researching music and what sound is and what can we make with sound, but we are doing it in public. That's just kind of the difference. And it's no longer about presenting results rather than sharing an experimental device and event with people around.
Jim, do you want to take a break at any point? We're about halfway through.
I can't do that. Can I have like 10 minutes?
Oh yeah, of course. I was just
because I'm almost done on like this part, and then I wanted to have like the last bit to open the conversation.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I just have to gather my thoughts again. Okay. Yeah. So yes, again, just to sum it up, it remains open the question of what is transmitted and what's produced in sound art knowledge-wise, which are a set of theoretical decisions, of course, that we will cover later in the sessions. And just to like sort of get out of the abstract world, it conveys with it questions like, will the exhibition on hip hop be successful if it provides you with a rich synthesis of a musical universe, of its genres, its subgenres, with tracing a line within this musical cloud of instances that would help unify them all? How would we qualify a successful exhibition of that is about a historical and contemporary musical movement? What kind of knowledge are we supposed to provide? Okay, and I guess that's my transition slide. So I can like do the transition and then maybe have a break or open the room for questions, and then I will do the last bit if that's good. So after all of this, if we have and if we embrace the concept and the relevance of the concept of sonic agenda, just as there was with Elizabeth Edwards, the photographic agenda, the question is, what would it be? And what does this agenda would aim at? How is it that we would investigate to identify parts of this agenda? The second thing is about layering the research in sound art and having to conceive of sound art curation as being layered with layer of pedagogy, layer of curation, layer of creation, which I may call two explicans. For one explanandum, which is the sound. So the sound is what has to be explained, the massive mystery of sound theorists and of sound artists. What is it that we are manipulating? What is it that we are trying to theorize when we are doing sound art, when we are doing music theory? And this explicandum can be explained through two logics and investigated through two logics, which are either creation. So I will try to understand sound through manipulating sound, producing sound, playing with sound. And I'm also, that's the layer of curation, maybe trying to explain sound through organizing different and structuring different paths, different logics of interpreting sound and making sense of sound. And so that would be the layer of curation, be it experimental or being about transmitting results. I mean, the two options are absolutely open there. And the the following on the slide is about the next one. So I'm just gonna like briefly introduce this. We are gonna talk. That's what I wanted to open the conversation on. I've talked about music, sound. I've talked about curation, giving you a few concepts and maybe a glimpse of like the fog that is around all of this. Now I want to talk about instruments that are used to make music or sounds, analyzing them through the prism of what I will call instrumentalism, which is the technological determinism according to which the metaphysical and aesthetic affordances of an instrument are determined by that very instrument. With the interest of Magnuson's position, which is that an aesthetic affordance is not predetermined by use. So it's really not yet about practice, just about the instrument. And I'm gonna develop a bit later on the example, so I'm not spoiling anything there. But yeah, just so that you know where we are heading towards. And at that point, if you want to break or have any questions, this is your time. I hope it was clear. So Zenobia, I guess maybe handing over to you. Oh, Jonathan, sorry.
Different. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, we can kind of do more of a conversation right now. I actually have one, Jim, just because now that we're on this slide, like this notion of technological determinism, like I have a couple questions on that. Maybe one is quite generic, like what do you mean by that? And then but two, are you just knowing kind of your research with Simondon, are you taking something from Simondon and coming up with this concept?
Okay. So what's technological determinism? It's the idea that the technology, the instrument, will circumscribe, delineate, and put limits to the possibilities of what you can do, both in terms of, I guess, material action, and in terms of meaning production, of like what you can produce with this when you make music with it, for instance. So it's really about like, I guess, the emotions you can provoke, or the where you will tickle the metaphysical, the limbo, metaphysical limbo of the world with your instruments is totally determined by the instrument. Actually, in my head, I have like Luigi Russolo's Intonare Mori. So the Intonare Mori is the instrument that Russolo, who published like the book The Art of Noise in 1913, embraced this kind of idea that the Intonare Mori, which was an instrument that made noise, is almost the only type of instrument that helps you get to the fundamental structure of the world, which is, I guess, noisy and like this nominal world that you can get to with the internal memory, and it's determined by the instrument. It's not determined, like you can't do that with a saxophone, for instance. And if I do something with Simondon, I'm gonna do something with Simondon, but not in this session. Although I can make connections like during the conversations, but I'm gonna try to bring it through progressively, and that's mostly gonna be when we are gonna tackle when we are gonna tackle like occult philosophy and alchemy next session. There is a massive interest of Simondon for alchemy. So I'm going to draw a bit of things from him there. And then when we are going to try to identify the shift from correspondence and expression to, I guess, effectivity and emergence, we're also going to use a lot of Simondon and Brian Masumi as well. You're welcome.
Oh, great. Yeah. Are you seeing this too as well, Jim? The Q&A?
So it's like a more pragmatically inclined view of metaphysics, as in the relation between subject and object being at least mostly determined by the relation itself. You mean about instrumentalism? Okay, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's, well, I guess this is not for nothing that Magnuson's, I guess, technological determinism that we are going to see a bit later connects with Persian semiotics, because Peirce himself also had this clause that because meaning and signs could also like indefinitely um, ah I don't have the English word for that. Anyway, like echo one another, and like meaning symbol, like the definition of something leads you to the definition of the other thing that's used to define this thing, and so on and so on indefinitely. And what he says is that at some point, the thing is that reality happens. And so if you want to settle on the definition of something, like pencil is something that you write with, okay, so what's writing and everything, at some point you just take your pen and you write something down and you have your definition. And so this moment when you sort of summon practice and summon reality is really where you can help like getting out of metaphysical conundrums. And so I guess Magnuson connects with this kind of, as you say, pragmatically inclined view of metaphysics because of that. And so the relation with the instruments, the instrument is indeed like a material, practical determination of what you can and cannot do musically and as well metaphysically. He will, I don't know if you have read the text, he really parallels Persian semiotics with types of instruments, so icon, index, and symbol, and he connects them with type of instruments. So icon is acoustic, index is electric, and symbol is digital. And from that, he's kind of really trying to drive this massive machine of how is it that instruments help make meaning, a meaning which is always conditioned by the affordances, metaphysical affordances, here signifying affordances of your instrument. I hope this answers your question. You're welcome. I don't know if I can have you speak, but I see that you have your hand raised, Ivan.
Yeah, hi. I wanted to ask if you have read Jacques Attali's Noise,
Yeah, absolutely.
because when you were speaking about noise and sound art, etc., I was thinking the book is really old, right? But I was thinking how applicable is Atali in case of sound art, because he talks about music, right? But do you think some of his ideas in that book are applicable to some extent to sound art? If yes, how? And if do you think they also do you think that Atali can say something about how we should curate sound art?
Okay. So Atali's noise, I will try to reduce it to a few core propositions. Analyzes music and noise in the light of what's going on in the music and disc industry. And in music and disc industry, he realizes that this new field of goods circulating have trends and movements that may help us, if we analyze what's going on in the music that kind of blows up, help us maybe get grasp on what the future might be. Like that's where we get an insight into like the future of the world. There is a massive futurology in this book. Does it change for curation? Alors, I don't know why this gets out in French, but well, it may illuminate curation as being thought about both in galleries and outside of galleries, but for two different reasons. Outside of galleries, curation happens, and it happens a lot today, mostly through digital curating and algorithmic curation. So either you have like this peer-to-peer curation of, I don't know, I make a Spotify playlist and I send that to the internet, or I have algorithmic recommendation systems that will curate for me sounds that resembles what I like. In that regard, the futurology that is present in Atali may help us realize that through the analysis of these massive trends that are produced and entertained by these, let's say, algorithmic type of recommendation, and so algorithmic curating, you may be on, if you analyze the works that are being promoted through that, you may, if you make an sonic analysis of it, you may be able to predict formally what the future might look like. So the future might look like here is just, it's not about like having, I don't know, premonitions or something like that, or visions. It's more about understanding that some elements of, I don't know, like voice or um, collective concepts such as the distribution between the interior and the exterior, for instance, might change. So if you have a careful look at what the norm curates, pretty much, and how the norm defends itself and transforms itself, you may get a grasp on this type of futurology. If you get into the other part of curation, so not like pop music curation and not the disc industry, but curation of gallery spaces as research spaces, sorry. What you can make of Atali's noise is a bit more specific and a bit more critical of Atali actually, which is that it could mean that you are having what Atali calls noise entering gallery spaces under the figure of like avant-gardism. So it's like, okay, I need to give you some context. The context is Robin James's book, The Sonic Episteme, in which in one of the chapter, which she is very critical of Atali, by the way, but okay, I'm going to make a little drawing. She has this idea that, so this is kind of the bell curve of music production and sound production, and normativity through popular culture happens through the over presentation of like this, which is the norm. And she's trying to see, well, to, I guess, claim that innovation, which can be conservative or not conservative, and I don't know, like, I don't have the word. Well, conservative or the opposite, let's just say that, can happen either here. So this would be more like Atelier's position, or here, where this is like the works that don't really get to be broadcast in, like, everything are not really found on Spotify or whatever, or with great difficulty. And this is noise. This is noise because this is phenomenon that are part of this bell curve, but which are on the margin of it. And this margin, like, sort of work the system and changes its direction and its aims. And so maybe if we, I hope I'm like having like the connections between the dots clear here, but if we take this as where the curation as research should happen, we can make something of this idea of noise having its own place and its own rights in, like, curatorial spaces, and especially gallery spaces. So that's not really against, well, that's kind of against Atelier, because Atelier really values the futurological element of the norm, and of, like, I don't know, the norm with innovation is pop songs that really blow the charts up. In her book, James mentions Signs of Times as a transitional track, mentions a track from Taylor Swift, I don't remember the name, and Bitch Better Have My Money by Rihanna as well. So these are all tracks that are innovative in a way, which blew the charts up, and which may also, like, move and be noise to the system, even though it's like it's like still recuperable and amenable to the system that it sort of changes or shakes a little bit. I hope that, am I clear? Is it okay? Okay.
Can I have a follow-up question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I wanted to, when you speak about Robin James, I've read her other book about melancholia in popular music. So do you think, again, I have the same kind of question. Do you think this is applicable to sound art in a way? So do you think that sound art should seek melancholia?
This is okay. Do you mean should it seek melancholia in order to achieve any particular goal, or do it? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in the way that Robin James described it in her book. I forgot the name. It's Melancholia something, popular music, released in Verso books a few years ago.
Okay, I think I haven't read that one. If
okay, then
I'm sorry.
then it's okay.
Okay, but I'm gonna look for it for maybe like next session, or to reply to.
Yeah, she defines it as like the opposite of resilience, and the most of the pop music is written to like to make us embrace the resilience capitalism. So we should overcome every every bad thing that happens to us. And she finds that melancholia in music is the way to free ourselves. So
Okay. Well, let me say that. So, just to be sure, I haven't read the book, so I don't know what are her arguments for that. However, if I'm like replying on the top of my head like this, I wouldn't be advocating so much for melancholia as like a very efficacious political affect, because melancholia sort of draws you down energy-wise, and so maybe that's where she argues and helps us like seeing differences. But with what I have in mind right now, I guess I would more lean towards political efficacy of noise and sound art in general, through the defense of maybe like not even sound art, but just like punk music, pretty much. That is the political affect of anger. It seems to me way more effective in terms of protestation rather than melancholia. But again, like this is probably very naive because I haven't read her book yet. Yep.
Yeah, one thing I'm just kind of thinking of on the tack of like the anti-romanticism. I'm just offering up this idea. I feel like this has kind of been scrambled more recently. Of like you talk about this divide between music and sound art, and maybe this is kind of the purpose of the class, to explore how this is a pretty porous bifurcation. Sound art being anti-romanticist, but I'm just curious to explore the space of like maybe now, like, you know, with algorithmic Spotify playlists, you know, it's such affect driven, vibe, mood driven music. Music has become really in a way anti-romanticist too. You know, like there's some sense in which they've swapped places, or you know, and I'm just thinking of an installation of Florian Hecker's that I got to see a couple of years ago, and it was just like this hour-long immersive performance, which kind of became sound art because we were all just standing in this space with quadraphonic surround speakers, and it was this very kind of, you know, romanticist. It felt like revelatory. So I don't know. I'm just curious about this kind of dialectic scrambling itself more recently, especially with just this having to do a lot with the technology and the way that music's like algorithmic scope has changed the way we listen to it, maybe.
Okay. Well, I guess maintaining or not maintaining the porosity of sound art and music isn't, well, it's a starting question, but I'm not sure it's something that we absolutely need, you know, to settle clear in order to think clearly about what's going on in these artistic fields. However, about this anti-romanticism, so I guess what I draw from your intervention is that sound art hasn't really given up on interiority and hasn't really given up the field of revelation. And about this, I would absolutely agree with you insofar as even with I don't know, most famous theorists today talking about music, sound art, and the metaphysics of it, like Christoph Cox. One of his points is that there is something that is, well, let's just say revealed here, but it's more enacted which is the impulse time. The impulse time of having access to a non-rhythmical, non-linear, non-chronologically organized and structured time as the time that we can find in music, like pop music, pop songs, who always surround sonic agency with closure of like beginning, middle, and end. So with narrativity with it as well. And doing that by enacting this kind of impulse time, supposedly you indeed do get access to something that you never have access to anyway, which sort of phenomenologically produces a form of revelation, which is the discovery of a new possibility of relating to time in a different way. And so that's the first point. The second point would be about anti-romanticism. I guess you can absolutely say, especially with Spotify playlist, for instance, that there has been a turn in. Granted, like it's affect driven. Pop music like Spotify, it's always affect driven, but we kind of have subordinated these affective elicitation to our own actions. And so it's more actually action guided and action oriented rather than affect. It's more like I'm trying to orient and install an effective landscape and environment in which I'm going to be able to perform this or that action, but it's really action oriented. So I guess that could be absolutely a way to defend its anti-romanticism here with like pop music. About the sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Jim. I was wondering if by bringing this the sonic event close to art, that would always point to some kind of intentionality, because for me, it's different that division between emotion and affection, and emotion for me is not so intentional like affection, and I was wondering this in this context. So could you develop more on that?
Okay, sorry, you divided emotion and affection on intensity. Did I get that right?
Intentionality.
Intentionality, okay, sorry. Okay. You can divide it on intentionality if you sort of preserve intentionality as a concept that applies to subjects. If you remove the idea that intentionality is always on the part and on the behalf of subjectivity and individuality, then you can absolutely open the idea of intentionality to like the affective. Because mostly when we are working with the distinction between emotions and affects, we are working with the distinction about something that happens to us subjectively, and that sort of resolves any kind of tension or whatever that is, and the affective, which may be the place for what Deleuzians and Simondonians calls transindividuality. So something that really operates at a level where subjectivity doesn't matter yet and is not yet valuable to be taken into account. And so in like the shift from romanticism to sound art, this is also a parameter that occurred that I mentioned, which is you have this idea of emotion, of music is addressed to individuals and to like their emotions, be they collective emotions such as nation-related emotion, because romanticism was a musical movement where there was a massive movement for nationalistic elation of feelings through romantic music. If you think about like Smetana's Moldau, for instance, this is kind of paradigmatic of that. And the affective dimension, on the other hand, is more focused on trans individual, so before subjective life and before collective, already established symbolic life. It's really like pre all of this. Is there any form of intentionality at this level? I'm afraid it's a massive philosophical question that would require me full development to like take position on that. However, in the sound art and music landscape, someone has taken position against the attribution of intentionality to this. And this is John Cage. John Cage, who really tried to, again, let's say, free art and remove any form of intentionality from artistic practice. So I guess he wanted to operate below that level or away from that level, and in the act and in terms of creation, it leads to, I guess, Bertolt Brecht's work. Sorry, I forgot the word, but the name, but it's I think it's Brecht's incidental music. Incidental music, which is a music that happens out of any intentionality, just because the task of the artist or of the performer is to attach beans to the keys of a piano. And this may or may not produce sound, because you are focused not on making sound or not making sound. You are focused on like having bean attached to a key. So there has been a conscious effort in some area of sound art practices to really remove this idea of intentionality from the musical creation. I don't know. Did you have? Did I answer to your question? And did you have something in mind?
Yeah. It was okay. It was okay.
Okay.
I was also thinking that curation in this at this point of at this process of collecting artworks and artworks that deals not with intentionality, but by bringing these artworks together, if this collapses by not by the artist's intention, but by the curator's work.
Absolutely. I think I haven't had time yet to mention that, but indeed that's absolutely true. It's that so far we can say that curation doesn't really absorb music and sounds theory development, because you don't find, as of yet, I guess, you don't find like stochastic curation, or you don't find non-intentional, chaotic, random curation, for instance. There is always this idea that we have to, when you curate, you have to create continuity rather than disruption. And no, I didn't really mention that, but like you have three aspects of curation, which are often mentioned, which are organization, dramaturgy, and rhetoric. And these three elements are absolutely working against sound art's pretension, which also comes up as a challenge for like, what will curating sound art look like if you embrace and you curate sound art which want to deprive itself from these kind of logics. There has been a sort of nomadic exhibition, which is Birdcage, I believe, that in 2009. That is a nomadic exhibition that adapts itself to the desiderata of the artists without any sort of curatorial intervention and side dependency, because you're always moving around. So that may be an embryo of solution, but I guess the question would be super interesting of like, what would a stochastic curation look like, or what would a non-intentional act of curation would actually look like?
Thank you.
Jonathan, should I get back to it or?
Yeah, we have time. So we have until 11:30. There's a bit of housekeeping because we have to assign group presentations for next session, but we can do that for
Okay.
the last 5 minutes or so of class.
Okay. So okay. So my goal then will be to sort of run through. I suppose you have done the reading, so I can run through rapidly between Magnuson, Proy, and Green. And then if you want, we can have a little, like the rest of the time to discuss technological determinism and how you would position yourselves between Persian or Sassarian semiotics in order to understand what an instrument does or doesn't. Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure. Also, Jim, if you want to have students introduce themselves, maybe we can allot a couple minutes for that.
Oh yes. Okay. Just so administrative question. If I don't have time to run through all the material that I have for this lecture, is this like bad?
No, not really. We actually can also go a little past time.
Okay.
It's not that big of a deal.
Okay. Well, so in this case,
The
yeah.
recording, yeah, the recording can keep going, and then if anyone needs to leave, you know, they can catch whatever they
Okay.
missed. in the archive.
Okay. Well, in this case, I would be more than happy to hear about everyone indeed.
Would you like to do that now? Should we do intro?
Sorry. Yes. Sure. Yeah. Let's go ahead.
Yeah, whoever wants to start, because my screen looks different, I'm sure, than what it does. Or Jim, you can call on someone.
Well, I don't know. The first on my Zoom thing is Will Fraser, which I have already listened to a bit, so maybe you can go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Will. I'm based in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm a musician, and I've become really interested in philosophy. So this is kind of it. I'm interested in this kind of these like metaphysical questions around music becoming sound art, and having studied a lot of music history at school and stuff. So yeah, I don't know what else to say.
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you. Perfect. Who's next? I can name everyone. The next on my Zoom thing is Ivan Loginov. If I mispronounce your name, please tell me.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Hi. I'm based in Prague. I'm a PhD student of history and philosophy of science, but I also work at the Center for Theoretical Study, also here in Prague, where I work under the project focused on sound studies in the history of science.
Okay.
So that's why I was so excited to see sound related seminar at the new center. Yeah. So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you. Next is Annie Riga.
Hi. I'm a visual artist. I'm from Greece. I just finished my master's in fine art in the Netherlands, and yeah, my practice is not related to sound art at all. Although I have collaborated with sound artists. Yeah, and I don't have anything particularly related to this course. I just thought it was really interesting and wanted to participate just from the description.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's it.
Thank you very much. Okay, next is Igor Anario.
Hi, sorry about the cam off.
It's fine.
Because it's raining today here, but it is very hot. And I'm in Brazil, the
Okay.
northeast part, very close to the beach, and I think that's why it's very hot. But I'm a visual artist. I'm not. I'm also not so related to sound art, although I have some interest in it. Yeah, and yes, that's it for now.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next is Emma Stewart.
Hi there. I'm still in undergrad. I'm a third-year architecture student, and I'm pretty interested in sound and soundscapes. I like the ideas of trying to build like the places that architecture and sound can meet. I'm even interested a little bit in like sound design in games too, so digital applications, and I dabble recently, probably quite embarrassingly, in making experimental music. It's quite fun. I don't take myself too seriously, so I just like to kind of explore and try things, and look forward to learning a little bit here.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't catch where you were from.
Oh, I live in California. It's a
Okay.
small town in between San Francisco and Los Angeles.
Okay, awesome. I will write sound artists on my paper. Okay, thank you very much. Next is Anna Varden.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts right now, and I'm an artist and art educator. I also do not work in sound, but there's a decent sound art community close by, and I've been to a number of shows that got me very interested in the idea of field recordings and the ways in which we curate sound related to visual art. And some of the readings that we did this past week started talking about the translation of sound into a visual medium and how something is reduced or lost in that quality. And I think that that is what I'm particularly interested in, because most of the sound work that I have seen is always somehow accompanied by visuals, whether that distorts the intention or lack thereof. So I'm interested in further exploring that question.
Okay, thank you for the precision. I will, if I can, also like adapt the material that I'm presenting to you with your own like areas of interest. That's great as well. So I will keep this in mind. See if I can adapt a few things. Thank you. Next is Enrique Luciani.
Yes, that's me. I am a master's student in media studies in the University of Amsterdam. And I also work with interface design, but I'm really interested in music. I also make music, and got really interested in the affordances of instruments and instruments as mediation devices. I found really interesting the agility and playfulness text. And yeah, I'm really interested to learn a lot in this course.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
I'm super intrigued. I want to ask you questions. But next is Gray Broderick.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. I'm in New York. So I'm Gray. I actually do strategy and research and trend forecasting, but my undergraduate was modern culture media studies. So I did a combination of, it was like criticism, digital media theory, and then art production. And a lot of it dealt with translations between mediums of art and how emotion is translated in universal ways. And a lot of the work kind of kept on coming back to audio as being something that is so impactful, but also doesn't really have a physicality to it in a traditional sense or in a very like tangible sense. So I'm kind of getting back into sculpture and really interested in audio and kind of just the physics of sound and how that can translate emotions. So happy to be here. It's fun.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Next is Eduardo Camargo.
Hi, I am Eduardo. I am a visual artist based in Brazil. I've been working more or less with music since 2015, but it wasn't any of my main projects or focus. I always worked with field recordings, sample-based music, ambient music, but I worked with video as well. And working with video, I tend to start my videos from the sound editing. So all this skill and knowledge of um, messing with samples and effects and things like that became more prominent in the last years. I've made like a sound design and score for a movie for a theater company in the last year. And even though I don't see sound like as I would say as my main media, it always helps me to think on creative process, to think on my work with video and with painting in general. So I keep music as a very personal thing that I like to do, but it's not my main occupation.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next is, I think, Alex Cruz.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Cruz. I'm based in Oakland, California, working as a writer, interdisciplinary artist, and I'm also an incoming PhD student in film and digital media. And as someone who frequently works with and through experimental electronic compositions, my interests in this course relate primarily to sonics and phenomenology and kind of continuing this conversation around affect as it relates to synthetic speech. So looking forward to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Synthetic speech. Okay. And next is Rachel Kalipa.
Hi, Jim. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
I'm based in Pittsburgh. I work and I'm an independent curator, and I've actually worked with a lot of sound artists in public art and in curation. And I guess I'm really interested about sound art more thoroughly and just getting a better understanding. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sometimes the sound cut a little bit, so just to check that I got everything. You are from Pittsburgh. You are an independent curator. You've been interested in public art and sound art, of which you want to understand more. But you have been working a lot with sound artists. Is this? Do I have everything?
I think just about. I'm putting it in the chat too.
Okay. Okay. Oh, that's it. Yeah. Office of Public. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Awesome. I think there is everyone. It's did I forget someone or not see someone? Well, I guess that's fine. So, well, am I still sharing my screen?
No, you're not.
No? Okay. So thank you. I'm gonna share that back again. And we're just gonna do the last bit. Up. 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 Okay, so there we go. I'm going to be as fast as I can so that we finish, well, not on time, but finish mostly on time, let's say. I wanted to introduce you to a debate over instrumentalism, again, to make room for the status of instruments in like sound arts and art production, and how is it, what place should we actually set for these instruments, which are medium, which are also technical objects, which don't work on like the same logics. And so I have proposed you to read 3 papers, well, 3 authors of like 3 different positions, which is Thor Magnusson, Gabriele Proy, and Owen Green. That's it. The main one that I will go in like most detail of is Thor Magnusson, who decided to connect instruments with Persian semiotics and proposed an approach which he called ergology to understand the way that we relate to instruments and the way that our musical and sonic creative practices actually move from one instrument to another, because of course our practices are historically, our practices have started with acoustic instruments, up to electric ones, up to digital ones, always bringing some changes along the way. And so he's trying to understand how this linear phase of like acoustic, electric, and digital also has to be fed with an approach that helps us understand how these 3 elements actually interact with one another in a no longer linear way. So you have, I guess, digital instruments and digital composition, which can be exported up to either electric instruments or acoustic instruments. So you really try to sort of theorize this. What's interesting in our own perspective is that, well, if we just get back quickly to medieval music, there is musica humana mundi and instrumentalists. So in this medieval tradition, that was so important for the medieval world and for the modern world. Musica instrumentalis here is what we are sort of circling around with this, trying to theorize what a musical instrument is. And the first thing is that I want to, with the quote that's on the slide, I want to have you, well, deliver to you the principle of analysis and the sort of axiom of Magnusson's perspective, which is that instruments are antennae to the unknown, which helps us connect with curatorial approaches as curation as research. So these instruments are antennae into the unknown, into where rationality cannot take us, yet bringing back knowledge of the world and insight into the human condition. So 2 things at least. There is an unknown part of the world. This unknown part of the world, instruments can take us to. They can take us to as like detectors, explorers. So they will not really like deliver truth or revelation, but they help us explore and, I guess, map some area of things that we don't know of yet. These instruments help us get outside of the boundaries of the rational world. So the unknown world is sort of disconnected from rationality. The affordances of a musical instruments and the affordances of rationality are disconnected. Yet these instruments bring back knowledge of this world and sort of helps us investigate the human condition. So here, probably the unknown world that is being investigated through instruments is an unknown world, which in the end can be drawn back to ourselves as humans. So there may be a connection there, but this connection cannot be a connection that rationality can eliminate and explain. So that's, say, our basic principle for reading into Magnusson. Second thing, in the digital instrument, there is no necessary mapping between the human and the sonic energy. Sensors on the interface might change the sound through gestural movements, but those might not be isomorphic to the physics of the sound. So here we have, really we have the introduction of the idea of symbolic connection, Persian semiotic symbolic connection between the digital instrument and the human being that is producing music and sound through these instruments and with this instrument, and the idea that the gesture that you produce to have music and have a sound is absolutely disconnected and doesn't resemble in any way the actual, well, when he said physics of the sound, that is that there is not this connection that you have when you, I don't know, play guitar, for instance, or play the piano, where there is this kind of percussion system for the piano, for instance, that you get when you like push on the key of the piano and brings a sonic structure of like percussion with a heavy beginning and slowly a decrease of the volume of the sound. This doesn't exist in digital instruments because there is a strict disconnect between what you do and what the output is. It's related to your actions, but it's really not related to your actions as bodily gestures, which will be a point that will be criticized, especially by Owen Green, because for Magnusson, this was having him lean towards the idea that digital music producing was disembodied, and Green really wants to oppose this idea. Anyway, so this is our first approach of Magnusson. About Persian semiotics, because it's not in my in my next slide. You have, as I mentioned a bit before, you have icon, index, and symbol. An iconic sign resembles what it signifies. An indexical sign is contiguous to what it signifies or to its effects. And a symbolic sign doesn't resemble what it's aiming at signifying, and it rests on conventions. So there is a bit of arbitrary and collective dimension to this symbolic type of sign. So icon, index, and symbol. Icon is associated with acoustic instruments because, as I said, with the piano, you have the structure of the sound, which is dependent on, the material structure of the string that's being tapped on by the little hammer of the piano. It's also dependent on what the hammer looks like, and it's also dependent on the gesture of your finger when pressing the key of the piano. If you press it gently, you will have a gentle sound. If you press it vigorously, you will have a sort of forte kind of sound. Electric instruments are based on indexical symbols because you don't have this material form of dependency, immediate dependency that happens with acoustic instruments, but you still have the same form of gestures. So what is left to be sort of thought and witnessed is the connection between what you do and what you get. And to end up again at like digital instruments and symbolic structure of signification, again, it's just that you can do something which will have absolutely no resemblance whatsoever to your output sonically, because you're not the one, say, giving form to the sound. What's giving form to the sound is what happened in your software, but it's not what happens with your body. Because of this singularized three types of instruments, he decided to put up what he called Ergogenesis, which was an ensemble of concepts and description of operations that help him understand how is it that we create, exchange, and continuities between these three unrelated way of, I guess, making sound on or signifying anything with sound. So if you have read the text, I don't really have to dwell long on this. The main point I want to focus your attention on is the concept of ergophore and ergomimesis, because the status of the metaphor will be super important in the development of this lecture, because I'm going to work on correspondence, and correspondence can be, say, analogical, they can be metaphorical, and they can be, say, well, digital, and that's when you actually leave correspondence to move towards other paradigms of efficacy. So yeah, just I close that for now, but the idea of ergophore, of being able to transport physical, bodily way of like acting and moving and gesturing to produce sound, is something that can be transported. Under transduction, it just means that it's being turned two options. First, it happens through transmission of the closest neighbors. That's just like crystal transduction and mineral individuation. Or it can be when you transduce something, you turn it and give it a new dimension in which it becomes operative and accessible. And so in the case of ergophore, that's the definition of transduction that we are working with. It's the idea of producing a new dimension in which something that wasn't operative becomes operative. I'll give you just an illustration of that quickly. This is, oh, you were right, Jonathan. I'm bringing Simondon now. This is in Simondon. The two definitions of transduction. The second definition that we are applying here, you can understand when you understand how vision works. Simondon analyzes vision as an operation of transduction in which two incompatible images, the images of the left eye and the image of the left eye and the image of the right eye, which are incompatible because they are not seeing the same thing, rather literally, and they become compatible when you superpose them with a little leeway in between the two. So you introduce let's say a new dimension, third dimension. This is 3D, in which the two images not only become compatible, but become compatible because of their incompatibilities. This is the way to understand here transduction. Is like, because of you have something that's inoperative in a domain, because of the introduction of a new dimension, it becomes operative in the light of these what initially prevented it from being efficient and operative in a domain. So yeah, ergophore will be kind of important. Ergomimesis as well, because if we are dealing with having an effect on like the metaphysical structure of the world with Luigi Russolo, or if we are about having revelations on what being or sound actually is, which can be kind of extracted from a very Heideggerian reading of Deleuze, but I mean, why not at this point? So yeah, mimesis, ergomimesis, and ergophore will be important. That's the main elements that I wanted to draw your attention to. This conceptual apparatus has been criticized under two ways. First, by Gabriele Proi, who contested the use of Persian semiotics, so the triptych of icon, index, and digital, and symbol. for the benefit of an approach that is more based on Saussurean structural semiotics, which for them in the article can be summed up by the attention on two principles. First, the differential principle of, say, meaning individuation, which is that meaning arises from what it's not, and so it becomes what it is by being not something else. And the second is that because of this, you need to think of your sign in relation with a system of signs, of things that the sign in question can not be. So sign and meaning always, sign always acquires meaning in a system which gives it its meaning, because the meaning is sort of negatively determined. So the consequence of this briefly is that instead of having a pluralized logic of meaning making, you have a homogeneous logic of meaning making based on like negativity and the contrastive relation of a sign and a system, which sort of makes homogeneous the general meaning individuation principle. So you move from a pluralist logic from a more homogeneous logic of meaning making, which pretty much discards any relevance of the iconic lexical or symbolical way of making things getting a meaning. Another way of opposing Magnusson was put forward by Green in an article that precedes the Ergo article, that Ergogenetics article that I sent you. So it's not really based on that, but it's more of an opposition of the disembodied character of Magnusson's approach of digital instruments in the light of the defense of two things, well, five things which are singularized in the slide. We can get back to that later or have a little chat about this. And what I will focus on, just solely not to dwell too long on this, is that Green really tries to advocate for the presence of human bodies and human agency, even in the case of symbolic relation to meaning making. So digital instruments are not disembodied. It's like the relation to instruments, of course, is different. It's more dynamic, it's more contingent, but it's still a relation in which your body will be engaged, also creatively, because in order to create something, you cannot be away from your body. You have to stay inside. We would say that's like one of the principles of his analysis. And so it's just that the relation ceases to be unmediated by, I guess, convention or a coding layer that disappears and that is only present in digital instruments. But the presence of this layer doesn't really short circuit the possibility of having an embodied practice of music creation. Okay, so we have a few materials here to sort of challenge and question what is it and how would we curate sound art, curation as research, curation as pedagogy, for the two ones that I've dwelled on the most. And we have here some material to feed a conversation on what's an instrument is and how does it guide or doesn't guide our own practices of sound arts. This is my last slide. I have here present a few questions for you to maybe like feed the reflection if you need something to think about. And yes, I don't think I'm gonna read through the questions if you can see them, but unless I have to. But yeah, that's the moment when I give you the microphone and and we can have another discussion. And if you're tired and you just want to do the text and thing with Jonathan, it's perfectly fine. I understand as well.
Jim, we could also start with these questions next class.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And yes, of course, I'm on Discord as well. So if you wanna keep chatting about this later, we can.
Cool. I think maybe we should do this on Discord.
Yeah. Okay.
And then Jim, do you want to share the presentation, or maybe I could forward it to the group?
Yes, of course. I will send it. Should I put it in the drive or something?
Yeah, the drive would be helpful. We have a few spots where they could go. Here, actually, can I show the drive, since the next step is to assign spots for the presentation. So, I mean, I think if you put the PowerPoint here, Jim, that might be the most locatable for people.
Okay.
But essentially, so the New Center wants us to do group presentations for the remaining 3 sessions. So there is a spreadsheet when you go into the syllabus folder that has this document. If you don't have writing permissions or editing permissions on this, we can give you access. But essentially, we will, and since this is more or less, I guess, we won't do a presentation here. There's about 12 of us, I believe, or 12 to 13. So it would be 3 to 4 people giving a presentation on, that's sort of up to you, Jim. Maybe if you have something that you would want us to talk about, or if not, the student groups could make any kind of selections from.
Okay. Should I choose like topics or texts?
What would be most important for next session?
Sorry, what?
What would be most important for you for next week's session?
Oh, for next session, I guess, especially, well, maybe not for, yeah, maybe not for Will, but for people who don't have an idea of what happened in like the medieval times with music, I guess it would be important to read. The article of Bakush is important, but it's in French, so I guess we kind of screwed with that. Okay, well, any text, Andrew Hicks would be fine. Music, myth, and metaphysics, harmony. This one, this is going to be an important one because he heavily talks about the development of Boetius, Martianus, people that we're going to talk about in the next session. So, yep.
And then we also have these guys. But if it's, the new center hasn't specified how many groups, they just said at least one per session. So we could just have one group presentation on this one text.
Yeah,
That'll-
okay. It's a bit long because it's like a full book.
Oh.
So so I will, what I can do is that I will recheck after this what chapters are the most important, and I will publish that on like the Google Classroom or something where everyone can see it.
Okay.
Does that work for you?
Yes, that's good. Are there 3 or 4 people that would like to present next class? Okay, Will, I will write you down. Emma, your session 3. If you guys want to see the live edits. Are there maybe 2 others for next session? And then we can go. We could do this through email as well, I think, Jim. Maybe have people kind of sit with text for a while, and then I can check in with everyone halfway through the week and see who else would like to go.
Okay.
Sure, let's do this. We'll just do it virtually. I think that'll be best.
And then you'll update for session 3 what text I will present on.
Yes, of course.
Okay, great. I'll check it.
Okay, cool. So then I think we're good.
Okay.
Is there anything else you'd like to cover? Otherwise, we'll see each other next Saturday.
I guess I'm curious, could I present on like what reading interests me, or would you rather, Jim, that it be one that you suggest?
Oh, I don't mind you presenting something that interests you. Maybe just choose it from the bibliography if that's possible.
Completely.
If yeah, sure.
Okay, well, I'll like send an email or contact somebody like when I've picked one, so that you can say like yes or no.
Okay, yes. Okay, great.
Oh, and let's try and keep presentations under 15 minutes. That'd be under 15 to 20 minutes. That's just a new center sort of policy.
Okay. This is helpful because it also will help me know how long I have to talk next session.
Rachel, so the new center has asked to do groups, but I mean, Jim, if you want to kind of create our design a sort of format for ourselves, because we're also a smaller class and we have a lot of text, and I think that the group format that they came up with is to help out some of the classes that are quite big, that get into like 20 or 30 people.
Okay.
So we could also do short 10-minute presentations with one or 2 people, and that way we can maybe hit more of your articles.
Yes, of course. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. So maybe yeah, so the readings are there for each session, and then if you guys want to look through them and then email myself and Jim to confirm who is presenting and what text. And that way we can kind of organize our calendar a little bit more. Cool. Is that okay, Jim?
Yes, I think so. So it's mostly gonna work with like the spreadsheet and emails for setting group works, right? Okay.
Mhm.
Works for me.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And sorry if I was a bit stressed.
It's fine.
And see you next week.
Bye.
Yeah.